welcome to this episode of Studies in World Relations brought to you from the campus of BYU, Idaho. This is your host, Taylor Hunt. Recently, awareness has been raised in the university concerning the world relations with China. There are questions among the citizens of the nation concerning how the U.S. is dealing with the issues of China's growing power and whether or not they will overtake us as the world's next international superpower. It is clear that China is becoming very powerful economically, and that could either bolster or overshadow American international trade and commerce. With China's growing international relations, there is also a patriotic concern for the influence China may have in the world, culture, and politics, because I'm sure nobody wants to live through another Red Scare in the form of Chinese communism bleeding across Asia proper and beyond. We are very fortunate today to have two special guests in the studio, Jacob Ward and Jake Hause, who are both students in the International China course offered at BYU-I, and they are here to help us discuss Chinese influence now and in the future. It should be very fascinating since Jake has little concern for Chinese influence, while Jacob is of the opinion that China is destined for greatness, again, as it has been in centuries past. So China's economy is expanding quickly. Do you think that the economy is sustainable in China, leading to international wealth, or are they destined to crash and possibly enter a depression like the one the U.S. did in the middle of its quick rise to prosperity in the 1920s? We'll start with you, Jake.
Well, I think the first thing we have to consider is the expanding middle class that they have. We saw that in the U.S. as a expanding middle class. We ended up in a depression and faltered back a little bit because we no longer had the base to produce the products we were making and export, which we can see is China's major economic position right now. So I think that there will be a crash in the future, and we can see that from what we've gone through in an outline of the U.S.
Well, that's certainly interesting. Jacob, do you have anything to say of why they wouldn't?
Sure do. I feel like China has already gone through its quote-unquote Great Depression. We can see that in the Mao era with the Great Leap Forward and other policies that failed. And also I feel that while China's middle class is expanding, we can still see at its base a much larger lower class. And I think that balance between upper, middle, and lower will keep it stable. I mean, China is expanding. There's no doubt about that.
Well, yes, China may be expanding economically, but there are a number of social issues that are present there as well. There's unrest with things such as the one-child policy, the controversy over the Three Gorges Dam, China's pollution footprint, and censorship of many internet sites, to name a few. So, is China socially ready for a rise to international power as well as economically? Can their people support the nation on a global scale, and are they even willing to? Jake?
Well, as I could see it, and from what I've learned, that there are many protests that they go through yearly, hundreds of thousands of protests that show that the people are unwilling to support their government and want to change. So we can see, if we take that into account, if they're not going to be supported by their people, they may not get supported by other countries as a superpower in the long run as well.
I agree. There are lots of protests in China. However, these protests, the majority of them are by minorities seeking, I guess you can say, political stance and equality. But I feel like a lot of the protests about China are from people outside of China who really don't know. And we can argue that there are people who are upset about losing their homes, but Chinese have the capacity to work hard. It's part of their culture. People can grow up from nothing, as we've seen they have done in the past 20 years or so. So I don't think that the social issue that we're talking about is much of a problem.
Now, another big concern with the China and U.S. international relationship is that the policy of the United States has been to bring democracy and freedom to other nations worldwide. But now China is entering the world stage as a potential communist superpower. How does China's rise play into the world influence of government and politics, and what could it mean for American democracy?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to consider is the conflict that if they did become a superpower that we'd have with them because of our contrasting views, that as we continued to go through and check each other out, that there would be a lot of conflict and that would arise from them becoming a superpower, and there'd be a lot of splitting between the world in general.
I'm not quite sure about this one. I think that if China potentially rose as a superpower, I think the U.S. would be scared. I agree with you. I think that just like it did in the 50s, citizens of our country are always weary of communist things. We don't like them. And I think it would be the same if China were to pass us economically, socially, militarily, and all of that things. I think it would be a scare again, another red scare.
Well, we're already over time, and so we are going to close up now, although we would like to continue this discussion. We thank you both for coming into the studio today and appreciate your opinions and perspectives. It will certainly be interesting to see how the advancement of China plays out and what America will do in response. Until next time, this is Taylor Hunt. Have a nice afternoon.